Hey guys, how's it going? I hope everybody's having a great week, and I am back with yet another review. But today I'm actually not going to be reviewing an album or a record. I'm actually going to be reviewing a book, and it is of course a music related book. It is the newest autobiography by the California punk rock band NOFX, and they came out with their newest book called The Hepatitis Bathtub and Other Stories. It's a pretty crazy book title, as well as the cover for the book. Pretty nasty as well, as you can see. And it's written by NOFX, the band members of NOFX, as well as Jeff Alulis, which I just recently found out that Jeff Alulis is actually Jeff Penalty. He used to sing for NOFX for a few years, I believe, which I didn't know at the time that I read the book. But anyways, this one came out just a few months ago in 2016 on the Capo Press, and I actually got it signed by the band. They came up to town just a few weeks ago to play a show, and before the show, during the day, they stopped by a bookstore to sign some of their books and to sell some of the books as well. So I picked one up and got it signed. So that was pretty cool of the guys to stop by and sign their books. But anyways, just a little bit about NOFX in case you're not familiar with the band. It's a classic punk rock band, among underground punk rock bands, I would say. They got started back in 1983 in California, in Los Angeles, and it's one of those bands that never really broke up. They, up till the present, they're still producing new albums, and they're making new music and touring all the time. And up till now, they're still running strong. It's one of those bands that never really stopped, never really broke up either. And it's one of those bands also that truly lived the punk rock lifestyle. So I was very curious about reading this book and reading about some of their stories. NOFX is also known for Fat Records. Fat Mike, from the lead singer of NOFX, actually created and founded Fat Records, which is a very iconic punk rock music record label, which got the career started for many punk bands like Lagwagon and Propagandhi, among others. So I was very curious about reading their story and the story of the band members. Especially, I wanted to read a little bit about their story about not selling out, because NOFX started, like I said, back in the 80s, and during the 90s they were in the peak of their popularity, and they never really sold out to a major label. So I was very curious to read about that time during the 90s when they never really sold out. They stuck into their punk principles, I guess. But anyways, before getting started with the book review, let's go ahead and check out a short clip from a NOFX song. This one is actually one of their most famous songs. This one's called Don't Call Me White. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the book itself. And at first glance, you would think that with a book title like The Hepatitis Bathtub and Other Stories, and with a book cover like this, you would think that this book is basically just a collection of really silly stories of the band members going out on tour, getting drunk, doing drugs, a lot of funny stories from the band, which it is in part. But I was actually very surprised to see that they actually included a lot of very serious stories and a lot of serious topics. Topics like growing up in California, in Los Angeles, back in the 70s and in the 80s. And apparently there was a lot of gang violence back then, and just surviving among those punk gangs. It was very interesting to read about that. Also, a lot of stories about addiction, a lot about drug addiction. And up till now, I still cannot believe that this guy right here, the drummer of the band, Eric Sandin, aka Smelly, I cannot believe that this guy is alive. After all he has been through, he was completely addicted to heroin. And some of his stories are very, very hard to read. It's very interesting to read about his life in particular. A lot of stories about death as well. It's crazy to read about so many band members, family members, fans, friends that died throughout the history of NOFX, either from gang violence or illness or drug addiction or something like that, or accidents even. Actually, the whole dedication of the book, they have a whole paragraph of all the people that died throughout the history of NOFX. A lot of people that died, so it's also very interesting to read about those kind of topics. And of course it has these fun moments, a lot of funny stories about the band, going out on tour, getting drunk, doing drugs, doing crazy funny things. So yeah, it was very interesting to read about that. The book also pretty much chronicles the whole history of NOFX from their band members' perspective. From starting back in the 80s playing music, a little bit about their influences, and NOFX is actually one of those bands that were absolutely garbage when they started. They were so bad, and I'm a fan of NOFX, but I'm a fan from their 4th or 5th album until later. Their first I would say 2 or 3 albums are absolutely almost unlistenable. They are so bad. Actually, I remember back when I was in college, I was already a fan of NOFX, but I actually never listened to their first few albums. And I found one of their second record, I believe, called Liberal Animation in a record store. And I was a fan, of course. I picked it up. I haven't listened to it before. I took it home, I listened to it, and I could not finish listening to it because it was so bad. They were just terrible back then when they got started. But fortunately, NOFX is actually one of those bands that got better throughout the years. They listened to a lot of feedback from their influences, from band members like Bad Religion, and they actually got better. They actually had a plan of how to get better, which was very interesting to read from their perspective. And later on, they got so good that they're actually, in my opinion, they're one of the best punk bands around to this day. And it also talks a little bit about their family stories, about their background, and in general it's about living the punk rock lifestyle. It's a story of NOFX about going out on tour, playing music, writing new music, and playing live for their band, for their fans. So it was very interesting to read about that too. But overall, I believe the whole message of the book is a story of a band that really never sold out, which is what I was very interested in when reading, before I read this book. I was very interested in that. NOFX, like I said, started back in the 80s, and they were in the peak of their careers in the 90s when the punk explosion was all around. There were punk bands playing in MTV and being signed to major labels. Nirvana was at the peak of their career. Bands like Green Day were huge. And this NOFX got a lot of offers to go into one of these big record labels, and they never did. They never sold out, and they stuck to their punk values. And I was very interested in reading a little bit about that too. And they tell the whole story of how they got all these offers, and they kept telling him, hey, you have to join the Warner Brothers, all these big labels. And they said, no, we're just gonna stick to our own indie labels. It was very interesting to read about that. One of the things that caught my attention was when they said something that, yes, for every Green Day that does very well in major record labels, there is one Jawbreaker, which is a great band that sold out, or they went to a major label, but never really made it big in the mainstream. And when they tried to come back from the major labels to an indie label, or they tried to come back to their former or to their first fans, the fans didn't accept them because they lost credibility. It was very interesting to read about that, and they decided not to do that big jump to a major record label, even though they got big offers with a lot of money. They just stuck to the Fat Records, which is the label that they started. Very interesting to read about that. And speaking of that, let's actually play a short clip from a NOFX song about the music industry. Let's listen to Dinosaurs Will Die.
Let it burn. Gonna make a toast when it falls apart. I'm gonna rain my glass upon my heart. Then someone shouts, that's what they get. For all the years of hit and run, for all the pitch bump and on VH1, when it all, their money go, don't we all know? Parasitic music industry.
Alright, so now on to my review of the book. I really highly recommend this book. I had a lot of fun reading it. Like I said before, it has a lot of really great stories. It has fun stories and more serious stories as well. And I believe that even though if you're not a big punk fan or a big fan of NOFX, you would still enjoy reading this book because it overall tells a great story of a band from the very beginnings to the present. From the very beginnings when they were absolutely terrible band, getting better, not selling out during the 90s explosion of punk, up till now where they still go on tour, they're still playing major festivals, and they're also very influential to other bands as well. It was a very interesting story overall throughout the book. I was also very surprised to see how well written it was. It was the guys in NOFX as well as Jeff Alulis do a great job at writing the book. And also, I really liked how they invited the past members of the band. Some members that were kicked out of the band either because they were doing too many drugs or they weren't very good. They came to write some chapters in the book to tell some of the stories from their side, which was very interesting to read about that too. And finally, my only complaint about the book, it's not really a complaint, it's more like a downside, is that I don't believe that the story of NOFX is finished yet. Even though they've been around for so long, these guys have plenty of more stories to come in the next few years because they're still running strong. They're actually releasing a new album in the next few months. And they're still, like I said, they're still touring, they're still playing a lot of shows, playing major festivals. And I don't think their whole story is finished quite yet. So I really hope that they write another book in the next few years as well to tell like the next chapter in NOFX's history. Otherwise, great book. I give it a 4.5 stars out of 5. I highly recommend it if you're interested to reading about music or reading about bands in general. Give it a chance, check it out. It's a really fun book to read, and it's a easy read as well. So I really highly recommend that you pick up the Hepatitis Bathtub and other stories. But anyways, that's my review of this book. Also gonna try to do some more reviews in the next few weeks about books and about albums as well. So stay tuned for that, and take care, VC. Bye bye.